Hey folks, I'm Chris and I'm your Commander Mechanic, here with another Philosophy Friday. But before we dive in, I wanted to let everybody know that over 70% of our audience are not currently subscribed to the channel. That's 70% of our audience that has chosen not to be eligible for August's big deck giveaway. If you subscribe today, you'll be eligible for the draw for the full 100-card Yuriko the Tiger Shadow deck. All you've got to do is either subscribe to the channel, follow me on Twitter, or become a patron, or better yet, all three for more chances to win. All this month, we're running a deck building clinic. We've looked at deck building basics, deck building 101. Today, we're going to take a look at card evaluation, how you should assess cards for inclusion in your deck. What makes a good card, what makes a poor card, and how you can choose between good cards for what fits better in your deck. Of course, first things first, there's no one right or wrong way to build a commander deck. It is all subjective and differs based on themes, mana curves, and power levels. These guides are all general guidelines. You build your decks the way you want. In the last episode, we took a look at a guide to see what kind of cards should be included in a deck. Ramp, card advantage, interaction, lands, mana producers, and that left a hefty 35 to 40% of the deck up to your decision. But what do we include in a deck in that 35%? What should we be including and how should we weigh our options? With tens of thousands of cards up for inclusion in any commander deck, what makes a card worth one of those coveted 35 to 40 spots in your deck? This is where individual card evaluation comes into effect. When a card is a better fit for your deck, when it does one thing that you want, or even better, when it does two or three things that you need in your deck. Confusing? Consider Sakura Tribe Elder and Rampant Growth. Both are mana accelerants in the same colors. They fetch basics, are cast at sorcery speed, and cost the exact same. Really no difference in function, right? Well, with limited spots available in your 99, look at what works better for your strategy. Rampant Growth is a great choice if your strategy is to cast spells. For instance, in a Wart the Raid Mother deck, you're able to conspire and copy the spell, where Sakura Tribe Elder works better in a deck with a heavy creature focus, like a deck led by Marin of Clan Nal Toth, where Sakura Tribe Elder can be sacrificed to fetch a land, gain you an experience, and later reanimated by Marin. That multi-use from a single card, that synergy, is what we want to look at and how we want to evaluate cards for inclusion in our decks. And it's that synergy and that multi-use that generates value. How far can you stretch one card? How much can one card play into your strategy? In another instance, let's look at mana rocks. In a mono white deck, I could play Marble Diamond, which nets me one white mana each turn. Or I could play Pearl Medallion, which will net me one colorless mana for each white spell I play. So, which is the better value? Well, if I have a very low curve and I'm aiming to cast 2 white spells a single turn on average, Marble Diamond will only net me 1 mana a turn, where Pearl Medallion can net me a colorless mana for each spell I cast. If I'm looking to cast more spells a turn, Pearl Medallion is going to be the better value. If I'm looking to cast bigger spells seldomly, Marble Diamond is probably the better bet because it gets me that colored mana. You want to choose cards to fill the spots in your deck that are as flexible as possible and lean into your strategy. Cards that overlap various categories are must-haves. Brainstorm, for instance, is a great spell. It's cheap, it's an instant, and it digs you into your deck while drawing you a card. But it gets better when you have more synergies. In a deck that cares about casting spells, it'll net you 1 trigger on a cast spell ability. So in a Talrand Sky Summoner deck, casting a Brainstorm is going to net you 1 trigger off of Talrand and get you a Drake. But look at its synergy in something like a Yuriko the Tiger Shadow deck, where not only does it dig you and draw you a card, but it lets you put something with a high casting cost back on top for you to flip with your ninja triggers. That makes it much more valuable when you can do more with a single spell. This functionality should bump a card choice higher in your list of cards to include and lower on your list of cards to cut. When looking at value, there's other aspects to consider, such as flexibility. This is a card's ability to do what you want when you want, and these cards are incredibly useful. Tutors are a classic example of this. A tutor can be any card in your library whenever you want it. It can be your silver bullet to stop an opponent's plan, or it can be your combo piece to close out a game. This turns every tutor you include in a deck into a wild card, and that functionality is priceless. It's one of the reasons why tutors are a little bit more expensive and are included in a lot of lists. Another example of flexibility are modal spells. Spells where you can choose what they do from a list of options. Charms are an excellent example of this. With 3 options to choose from, it means they can be what you want, when you want it, when it suits you best. The confluences or the commands are excellent examples of flexibility. They do what you want, when you want, because the options of what they can do are so versatile. The gist is that a card's inclusion in your deck should be based on the question, is this card good when I draw it? That is the skill floor on a card, the value floor on a card. If you have to ask the question, is this card only good if I have other resources available? Well, that's the skill ceiling, the value ceiling on a card. What is the best case scenario? And if a card is good at all times, if you're always happy to see it, then that should be a better inclusion in your deck. Now, if you've got multiple cards that are good when you see them, you want to start basing them on, does this get better with the overall strategy of my deck? Does this get better with synergies? It shouldn't be, this card is only good with my synergies. Would you be happy to see a card on the top of your deck with an empty board and an empty hand? Minimize the situations where your answer is no. Try not to judge a card based on its best case scenario. That's why so many people are inclined to include Reliquary Tower or Temple of False God in their decks. Their value ceiling is very high, but their value floor is very low. One last example, Coastal Piracy and Reconnaissance Mission. Both do the exact same thing in drawing cards when your creatures connect. They have the same casting cost and the same card type. But which card always has a purpose when you draw it? You can't cycle a Coastal Piracy, meaning it's only good if you have creatures and if those creatures can deal combat damage. Reconnaissance Mission is good in those situations as well, but can also be cycled if you have an empty board and need to recover. So, which is the higher priority inclusion? With limited spots available in your deck, about 1/3 of the cards to play around with, you want to ensure that the cards that you're including are overall good at a baseline level. That way you are never disappointed to draw a card off the top. You want to ensure that you're never in a position where you draw a card that just doesn't do anything. Now, there is room to play around with this rule. Of course, there are going to be cards that you want to include because the skill or the value ceiling is so high. And if that's the case, more power to you. It is your deck. But ensure that the majority of cards that you have are just good on their own, and that way you're never going to be disappointed with a deck that doesn't work for you. Let me know in the comments below how you evaluate cards for your decks. Do you look at the floor or do you look at the ceiling for baseline inclusion in your decks? I'm always interested in hearing your feedback and how you build your decks. Your insights are as important as mine. Until next time, folks, when we take a look at the next Philosophy Friday, good luck and have fun. All advice in this video is advice only. Commander is about having fun your way. Don't let anybody tell you how to play EDH.